The only good thing about a windy day is you don't have to put up with the flies if you're up in the country. Now, some of the most boring subjects are the most important. I know the big thing these days, as we saw in advertising in the past and we see on the virtual platforms, is clickbait, trying to get you to have a look at a particular topic which may be totally boring and uninteresting. Well, we don't do clickbait here on the Public Interest Before Corporate Interest YouTube channel. We just talk about the issues as they are, and if you're interested, you're interested, and if you're not, you're not, and if you learn something, you do, and if you don't, you don't. It's that simple. So I want to look at it, as I said, a particularly boring but essential subject. And I want to look at energy. Now, the debate about whether climate change is real or not, apart from the USA obviously, is finished. Obviously, the planet of 8.3 billion people and an expanding population and limited resources is faced with significant issues as temperatures increase. Even where I'm doing this short video presentation, or YouTube presentation, we can see the effects of climate change. Not the normal effects that you expect, but the fact that, you know, crops grow earlier, there's more heat, things die, and the list goes on and on. So I'm not going to rehash that argument. And even in the United States of America, where the buffoon in Washington thinks he's, you know, a descendant of King Canute and he can keep back the tides, the fact is he won't be able to. So what we're seeing currently around significant portions of planet Earth is different sovereign nation states, and as I said, there's over 200 of them on the planet currently, are doing different things in order to address the climate crisis. Now, increasing CO2 emissions are directly related to human activity. And what we've seen historically is human beings moved from firewood to coal and gas. And with the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, we saw huge increases in the use of gas and coal, and this has continued ad nauseum right into the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and to some degree today. But the difference today is people understand, well, some people, apart from the buffoon in Washington, understand that in order to address the issue of increasing carbon dioxide emissions because of fossil fuel use, we need to look at alternative forms of energy. And you've got things like nuclear power, you've got hydroelectricity, you've got wind, you've got the sun. That's right, the same sun I'm talking under. Now, historically, we have seen essential energy production normally in the hands of the state. And what we saw in Australia till the 1970s and 1980s is that the great majority of energy production was owned and managed by governments, whether at the state level or federal level, mainly at the state level. So we had government-owned power stations, government-owned hydroelectricity stations, government-owned, gas resources, the list goes on and on. But because of the ideologically driven privatisation agenda which has been promoted by a small section of society which has profited enormously through privatisation and corporatisation and deregulation and globalisation, what we saw is that energy production, energy is essential for life in the 21st century. You watching this on a YouTube channel requires you to use energy. Switching on the light, energy. Switching on your stove, energy. Driving a car, energy. So if we want to continue the lifestyle we're having today, well, we need energy. So if we can't expand fossil fuel industry because of its deleterious effect on the planet and human beings, we obviously have to look at increasing production through solar and wind and hydroelectricity in this country, where the nuclear option, for a variety of reasons, has been rejected. Now, the thing about the nuclear option is that it's a highly centralised form of energy production. And fossil fuel energy production is highly centralised. Whether the plants are owned by the state or by private players is irrelevant. What is relevant in the long run is that they're highly centralised. That means, as we see in the Ukraine, where Russia targets energy facilities, energy production facilities, what we see is that communities that are dependent on centralised energy production face significant challenges. And those challenges are related, one, to the threat of conflict, and as we enter the second quarter of the 21st century, conflict is becoming an increasing issue, especially in this country, where we have stitched ourselves to the coattails of Uncle Sam. We are no longer protected by our geographical isolation. It doesn't take 6 months to get a sailing ship to Australia. It doesn't take long for a modern missile to reach its targets, especially in the northern part of Australia. So there's the defence option. There's a defence about having highly centralised energy systems is ridiculous. The next is power failures. Failures at a specific level can cause catastrophic issues for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Now, hydroelectric schemes are highly centralised. You need a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of money to create a hydroelectric system. The same with nuclear energy. It is a highly centralised form of energy. But solar energy, as we see with rooftop solar and the increasing availability of battery for storage, and wind farms, are decentralised energy systems. They're decentralised in terms of the impact on the population can be minimal on an energy system that relies on solar and wind. But we have a problem in this country, a major problem. And the problem isn't related to the troglodytes who still think that climate change is a hoax. And the problem isn't related to Fox News and its, old-fashioned ideas, or even the buffoon in Washington. The problem is that Australia is entering the same energy cul-de-sac as we did when we had fossil fuels. what we're seeing is state and federal governments are totally relying on the private sector. And the private sector needs highly centralised energy sources to maximise profits. So we're seeing the current disputes, especially in regional Australia, between solar farms and agricultural producers. Now, the issue isn't that particular dispute. The issue is that we are moving down the same position. We are creating highly centralised energy production, solar energy production, and highly centralised wind power. Not in terms, maybe not in terms of geographical location, but in terms of ownership. And as you know, the old adage, whoever pays the piper calls the tune. So what we are doing is we're putting ourselves as a nation in a situation where once again we become hostages to corporations who have a monopoly on the creation of energy systems. Those of you who watched last week's YouTube presentation will realise that corporatisation is part and parcel of everyday life in the 21st century. And the corporatisation of energy production is a highly contentious and dangerous issue. Unfortunately, it may be contentious for me and possibly you, a minuscule minority on the face of the planet, but it is not a major issue as far as the federal government is concerned, where although it has accepted to some degree that we need to move from fossil fuels to renewable energy, the fact is bankrolling private corporations to create centralised renewable energy. What we are not seeing is the federal government using taxpayers' money to create decentralised energy production facilities, especially solar facilities, which could service quite effectively a few tens of thousands of people, but don't need to service the whole country, don't need to be exported overseas. So we are not seeing any federal grants going to communities, especially smaller communities and even urban communities in large metropolitan centres, to set up decentralised solar farms which may provide energy for 10,000, 20,000 households, and possibly a decentralised solar farms which provide energy for particular industries or small geographical areas which are designated as industrial hubs. Because in the future, it's decentralisation of energy production which not only helps to resolve increasing CO2 emissions and the domination of the fossil fuel industry long after it should have been buried, cremated and the ashes scattered to the winds, possibly in the direction of a wind farm. But what we are seeing is the creation of highly centralised energy systems which can easily be sabotaged, which can easily be destroyed in the event of warfare. It's ludicrous The technology is there for the creation of decentralised energy system. The technology is there to ensure that energy production is continuous, not intermittent. The technology is there, but we are not accessing that technology, and more importantly, all the billions of dollars which are going to the renewable energy sector are going to private corporations. The same household names which run the fossil fuel industry. We are not seeing significant new players in this situation, and this is the nature of corporatisation, as we discussed last week. It is the nature of corporatisation. What we see is the same players changing their clothes and continuing to dominate energy production through creating highly centralised energy sources. And when these highly centralised energy sources are controlled by a handful of corporations, we see an explosion in prices. Because these corporations are more interested in shareholder dividends and profits than they are in their customers, than they are in their staff. We see this now with the deregulation of the so-called energy system in this country. So we are at a critical juncture. A few communities, a handful of communities, has set up independent wind farms to service their communities. These communities can, through cooperative ventures, provide efficient, stable, and more importantly of all, exceptionally cheap energy for the people they service, to allow us to go down the same path of creating highly centralised energy sources, whether they're regional or urban, means that we will once again be at the mercy of corporations whose major task is to increase profitability for their owners, and if they're a publicly listed company, for their shareholders. Of course, ultimately it's about shareholder yearly dividends, not about providing an essential service to the community for a reasonable price for the consumer. So if you're concerned about escalating prices, you can go off the grid if you've got the money to go off the grid. And if you don't have the money to go off the grid, maybe you could look around to form a cooperative to set up an renewable energy creation system which services a few thousand people. It's been done before, it can be done again. It's not only economical, it's also sensible in terms of stability as far as energy is concerned, and as far as possible warfare in the future, as we see in the Ukraine. Russia continues to target centralised energy systems because they understand that a nation without stable energy cannot function in the 21st century. So we are at this crossroads. We can move forward and promote the idea of decentralised energy systems. We can form cooperatives. We can ask for government grants which can be paid off, because ultimately it's you and me, the consumers, who benefit through the creation of decentralised energy systems which are community owned or locally owned.